They'll probably buy.
We are. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and call this meeting of the Shutesbury Selectboard to order. Today is Thursday, March 6th, 2025. This is a special meeting of the Select Board. We only have, well, two items on our agenda. First is to interview candidates for the town administrator position. We will then be going into executive session for the select board members to deliberate. We will be coming back into open session if, assuming that we have made a decision during that executive session to announce our decision. So first order of business is to introduce. Yeah. So we'll just quickly introduce ourselves.
Sure. Melissa Makepeace, Neil, Select Board Co-Chair.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And Rita Farrell, Select Board Co-Chair.
Eric Stalker, not select.
He does everything else, except for co-chairman. So what we're gonna do this evening, Adam, is go ahead and take turns asking questions. As you'll see, this is a hybrid format, so we have townspeople here, and I think a few folks who are participating remotely, and that's how we handle our select board meetings. So first of all, I want to thank you for your interest in the position. I know you've been through one set of interviews, and the delay was caused by me. I'll take all responsibility in our getting to the meeting tonight because I was away. So as I said, we'll go into executive session. We have two candidates that we're interviewing this evening. Then we'll go back into open session to make the decision. And the hiring is contingent upon doing reference checks and successful negotiation with the candidate who we identified. So I think Melissa's going to lead off as the first questioner.
Yes. Thank you, Adam. Why did you apply for this position? Tell us something about yourself we would not be able to learn from your resume. What are 3 things that are most important to you in a job?
2 things important to me are mental health and getting results. Why I applied is some of my board members, I've had a little bit of some division going on in the town of Templeton, which takes away from my mind the productivity of the town. I'm proud of the results that we've done over there, but you know, a good leader knows when to fold the cards, and I think that's where I'm at in Templeton. And I saw the town of Shutesbury. I like small towns. I don't, right now I'm in a town of 8,000, but it's really, I looked at the size of Shutesbury, and I said to myself, this is similar to Phillipston, size population wise, and I really had an interest. And I'm from the Wild West myself, from Chicopee originally, so that's why I put in for my interest for this position.
Okay.
Can you describe your approach to communication with and managing staff? I try not to ask you all the questions at once. So yeah. And just talk about what first steps you would take if you were hired as our town administrator.
Well, I know Gabe doing a fabulous job. I would want to look at the chart of accounts. I would want to look at looking at the omnibus budget as opposed to the line item budget. Working with departments. I have a great relationship with town departments in town, and I would look at other ways that we could accomplish things. You know, it's really hearing them out, hearing what they have to say, and sometimes you have back and forth. Sometimes you don't agree, but at the end of the day, as long as you have that open communication, hear them out, look at the facts, and then you have to make a decision. That's the effective thing of being an administrator, making a decision.
And what have you done in the past to strengthen a team of 10 employees while maintaining accountability from those same employees?
We had department head meetings where the department heads all come in. It allows for input from all the departments. They voice their concerns, you have that open dialogue. Obviously, I always leave my door open. I have that as my own little policy to keep my door open so anybody could come in and talk to me, so they feel like there's always an open door. I think that's important. If I don't answer your questions all the way, please
Sure.
jump in and
Okay, yeah, I think that's, maybe just the first steps. What are the first things you would do? Sounds like you said you would meet with department heads. Is there anything else? And look at the budget.
meet with the department heads. I'm sure the budget's fine, but I like going over it because I think I have a different style than what you're doing here at Shutesbury. Obviously, I would work with the select board on that to implement that because you're obviously the elected leaders of the town. And my job is to provide support, provide that critical support and be your agent. That's my job.
Good.
So I kind of need to have, or I need to have the board supportive, and it's just one of the things we got to do.
Good, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Adam. I would say this question, it might be similar to what you just were talking about, but here, I'll ask it as it's written here. Please tell us about your leadership style. And then subset of that would be, how do you build trust and effective working relationships with department heads and elected officials?
Bringing them all in, and you could rephrase that into that question a little bit.
Just how do you build effective working relationships with department heads and elected officials? How do you do that? How do you
Well,
get?
what I would like to do is do quarterly reports, where the department heads would submit a quarterly report to the select board, and that allows a dialogue between the select board and the departments. That I think would be a good first step, and that way the public knows what's going on. That establishes that trust. I think that's one of the first things I would do. I'm not sure if you're doing it now, but that's something I would look at doing. Obviously, I would work with the department heads, and maybe it's not quarterly, maybe it's, because I don't want to come in and ruffle feathers too fast, so.
Right.
So I obviously work with them before I go to the board.
Okay, great.
Yes, tell us about your experience with municipal finance, including budget prep and grant application and management.
Well, I've done all of it. This is my budget that I'm releasing to the select board March 12th, so I'm not opening it, so it's like a March 12th to be released. But you can see, I take a lot of pride in it. I do a ton of work. We built up our stabilization account. We've done a lot of tremendous things finance wise. So I pretty much do the entire budget myself. Now granted, the select board can make changes to this budget, but I do the whole thing. And I do the draft warrant for the board. Is there a second part of that question? Yes.
Yes, so including budget prep, grant application and management.
And I've applied for grants. My favorite one's community compacts. They're pretty easy. Not gonna lie, I mean, some of these grants are very competitive.
Yeah.
And sometimes when they're very right to the point, it's just putting them in.
And
So
how do you manage them, the deadlines and the receipts, and when you have to spend them by and all that? How do you work the back end of those grants as they come in, if they're awarded to?
I usually leave a note next to me on dates to remember. Because you gotta work by deadlines. So like for the budget, for example, what I do is I do a countdown calendar where the board approves it. So we have each, when I'm releasing the budget, when the department reviews are, when the board's voting to approve the warrant, it's a countdown calendar where the board's on the same page with the administrator. So it's really keeping track of the dates and making sure you don't miss them. But the board also knows the dates too.
I'd say it sounds like you have a different process there than we, I'm not saying it's wrong or ours is better, but generally speaking, our finance committee does the budget with the town administrator.
Oh, it's easier.
Well, it's definitely easier. One of them's easier. I don't know. But, put it this way, they're very involved in the process, and the select board really steps in almost at the end of it, almost. And the town administrator is really the facilitator, more the facilitator of the budget building process. Does that sound accurate?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
And I'm just asking, my question, I guess, would be, does that sound like something you could work with? What do you think about that idea?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd work well with our, they call their advisory committee in our town, but they don't do the budget. But I work well with them, and it just. I guess it would be just a different process,
Right.
so I'd have to get used to that. A little bit of a learning curve.
So I just have a follow-up question to Eric's question. So in that case, you are securing the budgets directly from the department heads and you're putting it together, and then your advisory committee plays what role? We call it our finance committee.
So when I release the budget, so March 12th, I'm releasing the budget. That following Saturday, we have the department reviews all day with the select board and the advisory committee, and we go through the entire budget. The select board can make minor adjustments, but I always warn them, if you're gonna add money there, you gotta find it someplace else. So, usually they just make minor adjustments. But yeah, it's a different process. Than but I mean, it's just a different style, so I would have to, or a different way to do the budget.
Okay. Good. So how would you plan to engage with community residents and community groups to understand their concerns? And follow-up to that is, how would you address a contentious issue that has divided the community?
What I would start is with doing coffee with the administrator. I think that's a good way where folks feel like they become posted on the town website. They come set up a time, or set up a certain time at the library or someplace where folks talk with me. Maybe this could be every couple of months, 3 months, and have that. And if there's it's interesting you ask that question, because we face some pretty divided issues. It's treating people with dignity and respect. That's the most important thing, and setting up boundaries. So I actually learned to really appreciate people that are critical of me, because they keep me on my toes. And even people that I consider could be sometimes difficult at town meeting, I still have a great relationship with them. Because I said, look, they're just holding me accountable. That's their job. So it's really listening to people, hearing them out, and giving them a direct answer. Giving a direct answer whether they like it or not.
So I guess I'm gonna follow up. Can you give an example of when you did that in Templeton?
Yes, I have a resident that's very active, and he was making amendments on the floor, right? So the first two, I'm like, oh, he wants to move money there. That's okay. You get appropriated anyway. So I let him make a couple amendments. But then he wanted to make an amendment dedicating meals tax to go directly into an account. And I'm like, whoa. I got up respectfully, of course, and said, with all due respect, the select board need to discuss the policy, our financial management policies, before we make any decisions at town meeting. Because I have to be conscientious of the budget at the same time to make sure that town meeting doesn't do something that's not allowed by the Department of Revenue. Or I want to make sure that the select board, as well as the advisory committee making a recommendation, have some type of, what's the word I'm looking for? Policy before we make that move and have town meeting appropriate. But if it's minor stuff, minor things, so that's an example. That was at a couple town meetings ago.
And any other sort of more non-town meeting issues in Templeton that have been divisive around expenditures, libraries,
Chicken.
chickens, dogs?
So I did have one thing, actually. One of the board members got upset with me because we had a abandoned, half burnt down building. So we established a demolition revolving fund. And I worked we had to get special legislation for it, which we received from Governor Baker, and then signed by the general court. And then what it did is it created this demolition revolving fund, and we appropriate some free cash into it. And I had enough funds to put it out to bid, tear down the building, but I ran into a problem. When the hygienist that was doing the asbestos check, he missed the section. And so when they're trying to take down the building, they're like, whoa, we gotta remediate this the right way. So I ran past the contract end date. And I think he wanted me to go after him for liquid damages. And I'm like, it's not their fault. It was an issue that occurred, and you have to treat vendors with some dignity and respect. You know, they worked with us, we got it done. At the end of the day, we knocked it down, and we ended up selling the property through the proper purchase, roughly, I think a little over 70,000 we got for it, but we spent about 110,000 to tear it down. But that's an example of addressing problem properties, utilizing tools, thinking of ways where you could get these things done. Because you see it so often in a lot of communities where you have these abandoned buildings, and what do you do with them? So that was an example of another one where it got contentious over the contracts. I never went after them for liquid damages.
Nobody will steal your thunder.
I was just gonna say, you may have already asked my question.
Well,
You
yes,
may
but
have
anyway.
haven't been able to give us an
Sorry,
example.
I wasn't reading.
Let me ask you the question. You can say I've already told you that, you idiots, whatever, but, the question is, can you give us an example of a work-related problem that you've never encountered before? And I suspect that's one of them. And, how did you educate yourself and involve other people to eventually handle this issue? Maybe you've already answered this question, but you can try it again or think of something else.
Where I had to educate myself about an issue. I don't think. So we had some issues with the regional schools. And I had to educate myself on the process for considering all options, whether we withdraw, whether we expand. And that was an educational experience. I was on the school committee, so I have some experience with that, but we were getting unsustainable increases. So I had, as the administrator, to establish a working group to explore all options. It wasn't a popular decision, and I took some pretty nasty feedback. But it was the decision I had to make as the chief financial officer, because we were getting $1 million increases from the last assessment. And I have to explore all options as the town administrator, so I made that decision. It wasn't received well by the district, but I had to do what was best for the town of Templeton. That's my fiduciary responsibility. So I did educate myself more on that process, because when I was in Chigley, we didn't have a regional school district.
So what was the outcome?
It's still ongoing.
Okay. We're in a.
It's part,
regional-
it's part, it's part,
regional
gonna say,
school
it sounds very
district.
good.
it's actually part of the reason my last day in Templeton's March 17th.
Oh, okay.
I had to make a politically unpopular decision, so.
Mhm. Okay, good. And Melissa? thank you.
So, kind of negotiating collective bargaining, how would you describe your negotiation style? And then, what are your strengths and weaknesses? There's another question too, but
Strengths, negotiations, talking with people, I enjoy it. Weaknesses, patience. But I love unions. I bargained all my unions over in Templeton. They've all negotiated, they have settled contracts. And quite frankly, I think it's important to treat people at the table. They have to trust what you're saying to them. And it's a give and take, right? They're not gonna get, basically, I'm not gonna get everything I want. You're not gonna get everything you want. But what could the town afford? That is the question. What could the town afford? And that's my job. So we can make it work, okay, if we can't, but when I do the bargaining, I do ground rules at the beginning. And I usually do it where we have to agree on everything, both of them, the union and myself. I establish ground rules right at the beginning. Patience.
and you actually already answered the next question, how would you apply these skills to collective bargaining, which you did already answer that question.
How many unions do you have here, if you mind me asking you a question?
Teachers and police.
Yeah, too.
2 unions?
Okay, can you tell us about a time that you moved your department or team forward? And, is there anything you would do differently? Let's say you were, for example, you wanted to institute a new policy or procedure that might not have been popular. How did you bring people together?
That's a good question. What I learned, is you have to engage your select board more. That's what I've learned in my time, being with the town of Templeton. Because I was elected too, so I understand. You get a lot of people that go up to you if you're at the grocery store, if you're at, bringing up their concerns in the community. It's really could you kind of,
Yeah, it's sort of, how did you move the team forward? Or let's say, how did you move the select board? If you had a different way of doing things, a different approach, and you wanted to steer them in another direction. Did you have to do that? And if you did, how?
I would present facts, and I like one pagers because they're very simple to follow and their bullet points. I would go in that approach when it comes to, if I'm looking at making a decision, and if it's really unpopular, it might be 2-3 pages.
And what was the response?
Oh, I thought this was a theoretical
Yeah.
question. My bad.
No, give me an example of something that, yeah.
Well, we don't really have anything that I could recall off the top of my head, to be honest.
Okay,
Yeah. I'm not gonna BS you.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
all right, good, thank you. You're next.
Oh, there's more. Oh, there's another page.
Yeah.
Oh, another bit.
Don't get relaxed yet.
Real, yeah, he's very well prepared.
How would you describe your approach to the role of the town administrator? How would you measure your own success? What indicators would you look for in the first year? And what about in 5 years would there be different indicators?
So if I could kind of answer that in part,
Sure.
because one thing I'm really proud of is, we took an old elementary school and we put it out to bid, and we're bringing in the Baldwin School apartments. 49 of the 54 units are affordable housing. In the Commonwealth, we have a crisis with affordable housing. It's something that needs to be addressed. And it's really engaging the community and for folks to really be supportive of this crisis. We have a crisis, but there's opportunities, because if I had to take that building and tear that thing down, it probably would have been $1 million. No joke, $1 million. But instead, we're making the Baldwin School Apartments Complex project, which is a $40 million investment in the community. I've seen their project they did in Bridgewater, MPC development, beautiful project. Those are the things I want to bring to Shutesbury. I want to be able to take or use whatever I can, tool wise, put it out to bid. If you have any old buildings, I don't know. And using these opportunities, whether it be bringing the cannabis industry or affordable housing. It's serious, it needs to be addressed. And I feel like those would be my priorities. And bringing in all that new growth.
Is there anything else in terms of that you would hope to achieve, let's say, beyond, that?
Keep the finances in town well. Continue the finances. I think that's the most important thing. In my opinion, the administrator does make sure you have a balanced budget.
Okay.
How would you approach a large project which needs to be completed? Do you have any specific experience to draw upon with a large project?
I do. But with the Baldwin School Apartments project, putting that out to bid, coming up with a developer designation agreement. What I do is it's small steps, because if you look at the whole thing, you're gonna get stressed out. So I do it in small steps. Okay, I know everything about the building. Got to get all the specifications together, put the bid package together, see what interests are out there. Maybe even put together a disposition committee, right? It's all taking small steps, but having those deadlines, meeting them, and to at least get it done within a couple of years. or have some type of time frame.
And what if it lacked funding?
That's always a challenge.
What
That's what,
resources would you?
yeah, we have a bridge in town that, we tried doing a debt exclusion for the first time, went up for vote, failed by 2 votes. And quite frankly, we spent about, roughly $200,000 on the design. That's a challenge. Like, if you don't have the funding, then you have to look for grant opportunities.
Did you say that was a bridge?
Yeah. Yes, the bridge in town. Really disappointed when it failed. But I understand people, people want to keep their taxes low, so I get both sides. They feel the state's not gonna come and take care of the bridge, but state can only fix so much and only so much resources out there.
Okay, I'm gonna just, I want you to consider the following situation. Your elected board at a public meeting appears anxious and ready to vote on an important policy decision that you firmly believe would be detrimental to the town. The issue had not been discussed previously. What would you do? And how would you do it?
Was it on the agenda?
I don't have an answer to that question. It's
Well, quickly, I'll tell you, it's not on the
agenda.
You can't do anything.
Let's see, it was on the agenda. You put it on the agenda.
Yeah,
Do you create so maybe that leads into
I'm involved with preparation.
with.
With the chair.
With the chair. Okay, all right. Okay, so you have it on the agenda, but you have a very reticent board. They don't understand it's something that maybe needs a timely decision.
If I didn't agree with it though,
If you didn't agree with
I
it,
would try to delay is your friend.
and how would you do that?
I would say I need to get more facts on this, look into, because sometimes you don't want to make decisions on the spur of the moment. I was talking about how town meeting, changing numbers and all that. When decisions like that are made, there needs to be thorough research. And that's my job as the agent of the board, is to provide the board with as much information as possible. Now, granted, whatever decision the board makes, and I have to fulfill what you decided. It's not my job to counter you or, I don't know, undermine. You know what? My job is to support you. And if you made that decision, I have to embrace that decision. Whether I agree personally or not.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Which leads to my favorite question. I ask many boards when we appoint somebody. Can you give an example where you have had, oh, I'm sorry. Can you give an example where you have had to make a decision that you personally disagreed with for the better of the town or larger good? Or in this case, I guess, followed through with one that you didn't you may have disagreed with. How do you go about settling that for yourself?
I try to take out my personal feelings with the performance of my duties. And I have to separate the two. So I don't recall a time where I had a personal issue, because I try to really separate that. My personal feelings are my personal feelings. With me doing my job, I'm doing my job. I think it's very important that I separate those two. There's probably been a time that but I just don't recall specific this meeting. Good question.
There's no right or wrong answer.
So, what would you do if a select board member was consistently trying to circumvent established procedures?
Talk to the chair.
Our audience thought that was funny.
Talk to the chair.
Also thought that was funny.
That's what I would do, talk to the chair. I mean, I'm gonna try to talk to that member first, give them an opportunity, but you're my bosses, right? So I can only do so much. You're elected by the community. So, but I will try to talk to that member, then I would try to speak with the chair if I felt like I was not getting anywhere. And then maybe document that, I don't know, in the email or something.
So just lastly, do you have any questions for us?
Yes, how is your budget looking? I guess.
I'll let Gabe address that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to throw that out.
Released your information. I'm
Yeah.
not- These stars. We have challenges. It is mostly done at this point. We're waiting for school numbers.
Mhm.
And so the final we have a very early town meeting, April 26th. So we are down on the final stretch. And the next few board meetings, and people, please watch, where they are going to work out how to fund the budget. So there is a deficit that we're trying to close, and we all start out that way. I don't know of a town that doesn't have one. And dealing with the school and their budgets and their needs, is what we're doing. So we're almost there. And that's about all I want to say.
I mean, besides the deficit part, it sounds
Yep.
like it's moving along, but I
Yep.
understand what you're saying.
Yep.
You have to work your way through it.
Right, we're working on it.
Other questions?
And what kind of nice restaurants do you have in Shutesbury?
None,
That
we have, we have the Leverage Co-op, we're, just down the road, but no. Shutesbury has no, essentially no
Oh, okay.
commercial establishments. I mean, we have a couple of, contractors, but we have no stores.
We do the Shutesbury Athletic Club.
Oh,
which is
sorry.
the
Well,
envy
we
of
don't
many
serve
towns.
lunch.
Yes, we have the Shutesbury Athletic Club, which is used by the community. It's also, there's a bar in there. And sometimes there are town events there. The library, has, events and food is prepared, but there's no, if you want to go get a sandwich, I don't even know if the co-op has anything.
No, the
in
New
New
Salem General Store.
New Salem General
Yeah.
Store, yes. That's right, and that is equidistant
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
to the, right, I never think of it, I never think
Yeah.
of going that way, but.
So if I get hired, I'm gonna bring my own lunch home.
Yeah, or go to
Or go to
the
New Salem
Salem
General
Country
Store.
Lunch and gas.
Yeah, New Salem Country Store is
You
right
could
on. the road.
probably order it the night before. anyway. Just tell them have it
We'll
ready.
have it.
You start at
Pick it
7 in the morning.
Pick it up on your way in, yeah.
That's true. There's a Dunkin' Donuts right, I would pass by in Orange, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I think I'm covered. I'm gonna do some more research in Shutesbury,
Okay.
in addition to what I've already done. And I want to thank all of you for your time and Gabe for your service, because I know how challenging being a public service. You're subject to a lot of criticism. But I want to just say, I appreciate all you do, and thank you for this opportunity. It truly means a lot to me, and I probably should give you, non-gray
Okay.
resumes.
And it sounds like you are available after March 17th, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And yes, I guess my resume turned out great because I took a picture of
Yeah.
it, so I apologize for that.
that's
Gabe
fine.
figured it out, so thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I figured it out. All right.
Thank you for the.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Nice to meet you so much. Nice to meet
See you
you.
again.
Nice to meet you. Have a good evening.
You too.
You
Thank
too.
you.
For this meeting.
Yes. What do you mean, you have to go to town?
Can I take a quick look at his resume?
Oh,
You can have,
Yeah.
you can have that round like that.
Thank
did
just
anybody
gave
else
us-
want it? Did anybody else want to see the resume? Yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Really didn't phone it. AC doesn't have any athletic equipment.
I was
He
gonna
didn't
say-
ask.
I was gonna use the 12-ounce weightlifting, but then I thought,
Sometimes, yeah.
I would describe the AC to people as it's the closest thing you could have to a town-owned bar.
Right.
It's not a bar, it's not a town-owned, but it's pretty close. What's that? Get a dart?
Dartboard.
If you
There's a
want-
pool
if you
table.
want for meals on multiple days per week.
Yeah.
Often on Fridays, sometimes on Saturdays.
Yeah.
Taco Tuesday,
Not lunch.
mac and cheese Monday, they have
No lunches though.
no
lunch.
lunch. All of them.
They don't open till 4, don't they?
I don't know.
What was
Right
that?
past
I think they
it,
open to-
yeah.
Do you know the resume for the next person? Or do you think it's-
Yes, but I need,
I'm
Yeah.
gonna work that.
Yeah, here.
Take a quick
you
look.
can take it.
Thank
And
you.
then if you want to share it with, anybody else? No. I just wanna, I just gonna talk to Michael.
Yeah.
Michael, can I just talk to you?
What is the gift?
What is it? Like, knee thing. I am having trouble with my knee. I have a torn meniscus that they fixed,
Oh, I didn't know that as well.
but the problem with it is it doesn't grow back when they cut it away.
No, I know, you get
And if
arthritis.
we could, I have terrible arthritis and it's acting up because, reading your book is gonna be, yeah.
I have something you can borrow to write
Okay.
out of your.
But it's been acting up and when I just went to the orthopedic surgeon, he said, you're not ready for knee replacement.
I just saw it from John, I just had a knee, I just saw it.
Yeah.
And, after I went here, down there,
Yeah.
drop out and speak to him. You don't have any face.
I don't, yeah, he said to me,
You know,
Elaine
You're
has
not
a
ready.
question. I'm gonna ask her to ask it. Elaine, can you ask your question?
Yes. Could you please tell us who of the public is in the room with you? I'm sorry, I can't see who is in the room with you.
Yeah, I'll give you a rundown. It's, Penny Kim, Michael Z. Kiera, Merrill,
Bell?
Mendel, thank you. Gail Fleischiker, Tom Seifert, the next candidate, Gabe, and the three of us. Is that helpful?
Thank you, yes, very helpful, appreciate that.
I wish there was a way we could make the room part of the camera larger, but I have not found the solution to that yet.
No, that's okay, thank you.
Haley, if you're ready, yeah, we're ready. Hi, Haley. I'm Rita Farrell, I'm co-chair of the select board.
Melissa McPhee O'Neill, also co-chair.
Eric Stalker, select
yeah.
board.
Okay, so welcome. I want to thank you for your interest in the position of town administrator. So this evening, the three of us will be taking turns asking same list of questions that we did to the other candidate. And just so you know, the process, after we complete the interview, the select board will be going into executive session to discuss our opinions and make a decision. And then we'll be coming back into open session to announce that decision, assuming we make one this evening. Hiring will be contingent upon reference checks and a successful negotiation with the candidate. So we're going to go ahead and get started with Melissa.
Yes, thank you for coming. Why did you apply for this position? And can you tell us something about yourself that we would not be able to learn from your resume? And there's a follow-up.
So I applied to this position because it's the next logical step. For the past 6 or so years, I've been the senior center director. Well, half of that in Amherst and then the other half in Bernardston. But I've been really interested in progressing to, town manager, town administrative level. And so to kind of prepare myself for that, I started about a year or so ago, an MBA program through Springfield College, and I will be finishing the Mass Municipal Suffolk Leadership Certificate Program this April or May. So I've been kind of setting the academic framework. I have a lot of, adjacent experience, if not directly as a town administrator, but when you're a department head, you're making similar sorts of decisions. What you wouldn't know on my resume, well, I said this in my first interview, you wouldn't know that I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and you wouldn't know that I grew up in a working class household, or that I'm the first person in my family to go to college. But all those things are super important, and they've been a big driver in me always self-starting and wanting to do better and wanting to set a good example for my siblings. And on a more fun note, I don't put on my resume that I love craft beer. And particularly I love Treehouse, especially their summer concerts.
I likewise, the first one in my family to go to college.
So you know.
Yes. What are 3 things that are most important to you in a job?
Good communication. I think that's everyone's answer, but it is really important. right now, the team that I work with, my staff, I've hired all of them, and we're like always talking. Whether that's at work, after work, we leave at 4 o'clock, we don't get in our cars until 4:30 because we're all talking in the parking lot. So once you have that kind of comfortable relationship, it really does make all the difference. I also like just, people who have a sense of where they want to go. One of the things that stood out to me about Shutesbury is you have those long-term plans, you're thinking about climate change, you're making plans for the future. Those are things that I find really important. I'm not a big fan of indecision. The third thing, I like when people I work with have a good sense of humor. That's critical. I think if you're gonna be somewhere for 8 hours a day, you need to enjoy what you're doing and the people you're working with.
Can you describe your approach to communication with and managing staff?
So again, this staff, I've hired all of them and I work with 3 full-timers and 1 part-timer. And then we also have, I think about 30 or so volunteers. It's talking a lot. Typically what I do to save time is if it's something that everyone has to know, that's like an email or a Teams message so that can just get disseminated very quickly. But my style just, you try to mirror people, you try to be where they're at, you pay attention to the little things so that when you're communicating with someone, they understand that you've paid attention to what they're saying. Lots of active listening. Communication really is mostly listening. So you have to understand that when you're going into it. And then, I think back first day at kindergarten, you treat people the way you want to be treated and you should communicate with them with respect.
And what would be your first steps if you were to be appointed Shutesbury's town administrator?
I would meet with as many people as possible. The first 30, 60 days, I want to meet with as many people in town as I can, as many department heads, as many committee members. And then also people you work with the FERCog, you work with other communities. Thankfully, I already know some of the key players in Amherst, but I would say really the focus is on establishing those connections, because if you don't lay that groundwork, your job will be so much harder after that.
And have you been in a situation where you had to do some intervention with your team to make it stronger, and give us an example of that?
So there have been occasions where I have had to terminate an employee, the most recent of which I had hired someone to be an activities coordinator, just set up activities, schedule programs, that sort of thing. This individual was so excited about the job. He came and talked to me like every week. We made a decision, we made a decision. And so I did offer him the position, but what became very clear to me after we started was that there were some memory issues. And the quality of his work was not what I would have expected from someone with his experience. And so I started working very closely with him. If I wanted him to do something, I would walk it through with him, give him, write things down. But somehow, even in the 5-minute walk from my office to his desk, it wasn't being retained. He was asking staff the same question. So I documented everything. We did some warnings, some progressive things, and then eventually I said to HR, I've got a real problem here. The 6 months probationary period is coming up. And unfortunately, there's just nothing I can do to make the situation work. And so that was one of the harder conversations, because here you are telling someone who was a professional and that they were having those kind of problems, but he did acknowledge that was a concern from his family as well. So I think he took it as well as you can, but it was certainly a hard conversation. Thank you. Yeah.
Just this, maybe a somewhat related question, just a more general question, on the same thing, but, just what would you view as your leadership style? How would you build an effective working relationship with department heads and elected officials?
So I always tell people, I don't want to micromanage you. I want you to be able to do your job and have the autonomy that you need to do your job. You are the professional in that role. The things that are important to me are, creativity, being independent, being self-starter. Those are you know, if you're ever in a pinch, if you're creative, if you have a small budget, if you have aging equipment and you've got to make do with what you've got, being creative can be very handy. And so I reinforce that in meetings, you know, I let them know I'm new. There's a lot of things I don't know. Eventually, that will not always be true. But I want to learn from you in the beginning. I want us to have a good rapport. I want you to feel like you can come and talk to me, you know, when I'm in my office, the door is always open. And even if I close it, I can guarantee you someone will still knock on the door because they know they can come to me. It's a blessing and a curse, but.
Melissa?
Yeah. So, tell us about your experience with municipal finance, including budget preparation and grant applications and management.
So budget preparation for the senior center, I'm responsible for that. I just submitted the budget not too long ago. In Amherst, it's about a $400,000 budget for, from the town appropriated side. And then usually about another 300 to 400 in what I have to get, donations or grants. So yes, I have a lot of grant experience. The last one I was able to acquire, we did a grant with PVTA to expand transportation service to older adults. That one was like $35,000. I've gotten other grants for modernization, for new programming, meals programs, state earmarks, working closely with our state reps. The budget that I worked with in Bernardston was higher because I was responsible for building maintenance. So that typically was maybe like $12 million when you factor in the elevator and all the electrical and that sort of thing. But, again, in preparing for this interview, I did a pretty deep dive in your finances. And again, one of the things that I really like is just how clear everything is presented and the care that goes into that. Not every community is as forthcoming, but I really liked that about Shutesbury. And certainly one of my top priorities would be working with the superintendent and, getting a handle on the school budget, because that is going to be an issue for many years to come. And I think you have to know that going into it. I did a little bit of reading on the statutory method and how, it seems like this community is advocating more vigorously than others for that. So I think I've gotten enough of a shallow understanding that I could pretty easily just, speak with you and other people on the board and get a deeper understanding.
With grants, there's deadlines and there's a lot of management behind the scenes, finding new ones. How do you go about managing kind of that behind the scenes as you're applying for grants?
It's tough. And I think you have to be realistic. Sometimes people think, oh, it's a grant and that's just a free check, but it's not, like you said, there's a lot of work. So I try to familiarize myself with grant cycles. For example, I know every spring or summer, MCOA, Mass Council on Aging, is going to offer a whole slew of grants. Okay, so I'm going to set aside some time for that. One thing I had mentioned in my first interview is I think AI helps a lot with that. You don't have to slog through all the research. It can pull it for you, or you can give it the sources that you want it to use, and it can do that analysis. So that alone is like a huge time saver. You don't have to put so much into that on the front end. And then you just want to be, of course, checking the work and making sure that you're hitting the deadlines. And there's going to be monitoring that's going to happen and auditing. So just, I write everything down in my planner. That is pretty old school of me, but that's what works. And so, yeah, you just have to check in with yourself a lot, make sure you're on track.
So I just had a follow-up question about the building maintenance that you did in Bernardston. What buildings were you responsible
The
for?
Powers Institute, where the senior center was housed, and it was also the building where the Historical Society was up in the attic.
Okay, and so what did you have to?
I was responsible for making sure that all the, the electrical, those bills were paid. We had kitchen equipment that needed to be maintained. The elevator was a huge expense. Working with the highway department for clearing out the driveway. It was several years ago, so it's not like in front of my mind.
Yeah.
But anything you could think of building wise, when something went wrong, I had to call the repairman and come in to fix it.
And I guess my other question is, you had a, discrete portion of the larger town of Amherst budget, which, you know, is much, much more substantial than the town of Shutesbury. How familiar are you with the kind of overall, the overall town budget in Amherst?
So the overall budget,
Yeah.
I mean, I read it, I definitely go through it. I spent more time kind of preparing for this community, just looking at how, you know, so you get so much of your tax levy from the property taxes. I think a lot, even higher than Amherst, which is still pretty high. So that's obviously a concern, and, you know, certainly for me, knowing you've got people on fixed incomes, you've got, you know, families who might be struggling. You know, how do you balance that, particularly when you offer things like your senior tax work-off program? That money has to come from somewhere. You know, where the class that I'm in right now is all finance. So it's looking at budgets, looking at how do you best make cuts, how do you submit capital planning. So that's a class that I'm really interested in, and, you know, it's given me a little bit more broader experience.
And did you have to present before either the Amherst Town Council or they have a finance committee? I
We have
can't
a
remember what
finance
it's called.
committee,
Yeah.
so I thankfully don't have to go to the full town council meeting, but I do a budget presentation to the finance committee, which then they take.
Good, thank you. So I have a question regarding community engagement and how you would plan to engage with town residents, community groups to understand their concerns. So this is not just like as an introduction,
Right.
but
Like, as a continual thing.
yes.
Well, in Amherst, Paul does the Cup of Joe, so he'll go to little different coffee shops. You could do something very similar with your library here. You know, not knowing how social media savvy people are, but that's a great outlet too. If you've got people on either like Nextdoor or Facebook who are active on that, you know, do flyers. Yeah, I think there's a lot of examples out there, and I certainly appreciate that. You know, if you don't hear from people, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what direction folks might want the town to go in. You know, so I would probably, one thing I do like doing is open houses. You know, if there are big projects that are going on, have an open house, and have people come in, and, you know, you could have different departments there talking about what their roles or big initiatives. So yeah, I think I like to do a mix of formal and informal, probably more heavy on informal. I think that's where you get some of your best discussions.
And if there was a contentious issue that was seemingly dividing the community, how would you approach that?
So Amherst has lots of contentious issues.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So surprised.
I have lots of experience to draw from. I think the most important thing is you always have to keep your cool. Once you lose your cool, you lose the whole game. You know, so just people have First Amendment rights, so you have to balance that out too. But I think that you can set some expectations, and you can set a culture where people know that, you know, you have to be at least a little respectful. You know, I've had people call me all sorts of names, and now I'm really good at saying, you know, I want to have this conversation with you, but this clearly is not the time. You know, let's meet again when cooler heads prevail. You know, so I'm definitely not afraid of that. My very first job after graduating UMass was at Craig's Store Shelter. It's the only wet shelter in, I think, at least Western Mass. My very first night on my own as shelter manager, someone came in intoxicated, threw a chair across the room, and tried to get into a fist fight with another gentleman. And I was the one who had to separate them and keep control and tell the student volunteers what to do. And it's just been great ever since.
Yeah.
Kids keep coming.
Solve that. Okay, good, thank you.
Nobody's select board meeting's ever thrown a chair.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe, you've already told us one difficult situation, but can you give us an example of a work-related problem that you've encountered that you never faced before? And how did you educate yourself on how to deal with it? And eventually, how did you deal with it? I think you told us in one example.
Yeah, well, I've got lots of examples, but,
Okay.
one of the ones that was most challenging for me when I first got into municipal government, so I had one from working at the Survival Center, where I had interned in the food pantry, then I volunteered, then I got to run the food pantry. And when I went to Barnardston, and at the Sorrells, everybody knew me. Everybody knew me from when I was still an undergrad to when I had progressed. They didn't know me in Barnardston, and I got a lot of, well, my granddaughter's older than you, so I don't have to listen to you. And it taught me how to not advocate, but just stand up for yourself and say, that may be true. I'm younger and I will always be younger, but there still is a level of respect that has to come with that. There still is an understanding of what the policies and procedures are. And while I'm certainly happy to talk with you about them and maybe we can change something, there has to be some base level of acceptance. And that was hard for some of the folks I worked with. It was really tough for them to see me as their supervisor. And with that, I just go back to what I said earlier, you document. That might be a new employee, it might be a legacy employee, but you start your paper trail, you're good and you're bad, because they can't all be bad all the time. And then you just start that progressive chain and hopefully things rectify themselves before you have to get to a more serious level.
Thank you.
How would you describe your negotiation style? What are strengths and weaknesses? And how do you apply your skills in the collective bargaining situation?
So I've only I said this in my first interview, I've done mock collective bargaining. But I do have 2 union employees and I have a fairly good poker face. I'm very stubborn, so I count those as strengths when you're negotiating. But I can also see a reason. I might go into it thinking, okay, this is what I want, but then as you're talking, maybe that's a trade-off I could make. Maybe that's something. And I'm definitely not afraid to say, well, I need more time to think about that. Curbing yourself from just immediately saying yes or no one way or the other, just buying yourself extra time to think, can go a long way. So.
You go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, can you tell us, give an example of a time when you had to, move your department or team ahead on something that they might not have been real excited, about? And, how did you go through that process?
So not quite my team, but so we have a nonprofit group, the Friends of the Amherst Senior Center. And since the pandemic, their fundraising capacity has gone significantly down. Where once they may have been pulling in $50,000 in a fundraiser, now it's more like 10 or 12 for the year. So when I first started, we would mail our newsletter to 3,600 houses. So what that entailed was you do the newsletter, but then you set aside 2 weeks to fold and tape and package everything for bulk mail. Well, it ended up costing somewhere usually in the ballpark of $25,000 to $30,000 a year. Now, if you're bringing in half of that, the numbers don't add up. So I was the unpopular one who said, we need to stop this. We have to pivot to all online. We cannot afford to keep doing this. And I still hear people say how much they don't like that. And I sympathize, and we do have some in paper, some that we mail. But for me, that was a simple numbers decision. We can do this, but at such a great cost that it's not worth it. And again, stood my ground on that. I wasn't gonna falter because it was super important. And so, yeah, I just held the line of, we need to be fiscally responsible. We can't make this bad decision anymore.
Can I ask, it's sort of not on here, but who is your direct supervisor?
Paul Ballman.
Oh, so you work, yeah, okay.
So how would you describe your approach to the role of a town administrator? And how would you measure your success in that role? Maybe for the first year, and maybe 5 years into it, if there was a difference in the way you measure success?
First year, probably just no fires, right? If everything, the wheels are on the bus and we're good. No, but more seriously, just having an understanding, like again, first 30, 60 days, I wanna be meeting with people. I wanna be analyzing your past budgets. I wanna be looking at your bylaws, you know, particularly your solar bylaw. You know, I wanna get a pretty concrete sense of where we're at right now. And then throughout the year, just be working on, you know, you have to understand why things are the way they are before you can try to make improvements. Unless it's really obvious, but that's not always the case. You know, and in 5 years, I would hope that we can certainly come to some better agreement about the regional schools. I would like to have a plan of how we're gonna deal with aging infrastructure. And then be looking at, you know, I like what you're doing with digital equity. I think we can push that a little farther. And I think that there has to be some plan for how we're gonna address keeping people in their homes and not, you know, out taxing them while bringing in some new revenue sources, whether that's grants or something else, but that certainly would take 5 years to try to accomplish. And then I'd see where else we wanna go.
Great, thank you.
How would you approach a large project which needs to be completed? Do you have any specific experience to draw upon?
So I like to approach, not, you know, you wanna break it down, you wanna delegate. I think that's a skill I wish I had really pushed myself to utilize earlier in my career. You know, you wanna build a good team of people who can tackle the problem with you, but not so great a team that you're just talking and you're not getting much done. You know, you wanna set benchmarks. One of the ways that I like to track what I'm doing is in Excel. I'll make a spreadsheet, you know, I wanna do this by this time, this by this time, and, you know, this is what I'm gonna hope to have, these are my volunteers, so I kind of get really, down in the weeds with the details, but it's helpful. And then you don't wanna check in, you wanna reevaluate, you don't wanna get so myopic that you don't think, well, let me make sure I'm doing the right thing.
And then what if that project lacked funding either partly through or in the
So-
entirety?
That's a tough decision, and certainly one that I would want to talk with you as a select board and the finance committee about. You know, how important is this? Where can we rank this? You know, are there temporary funds that we can go after? You know, at the end of the day, it's hard, and like I said, the numbers are gonna be what they are. But I think hopefully you can catch it with enough time to make a plan B. I always like to have a plan B or a plan C, because something will go wrong. You gotta be able to adapt.
Okay, I'm just gonna give you a situation that, you know, I'd like to hear how you would, deal with it. So your elected board, so let's say the select board, at a public meeting appears very anxious and ready to vote on an important policy decision that you firmly believe would be detrimental to the town. The issue had not been discussed previously. What would you do what would be your approach with the board?
It's tricky, and it's always context dependent, so I like to clarify everything I'm about to say. Hopefully, we have built up enough trust and rapport that if I said, can we maybe talk about this, you know, let me make one last pitch. As long as I can make one pitch, I'm happy, you know, ultimately, I'm working at your hand. And what the select board wants to do is what we're going to do. I just always like to have the ability to say, well, let me frame it from this perspective. I do this all the time at work, you know, whether my staff are, oh, I can't believe this person did this to me. I'm like, well, did you reframe it and maybe think about it from a different angle? You know, and certainly if there's anxiety or pressure to do something, that's not usually a good way to make a decision. So reinforcing that and just asking for one last chance, to kind of plead my case.
Good, thank you. All right.
What would you do if a select board member was consistently trying to circumvent established procedures?
Well, first would be a conversation, you know, just look, this is either what's in the bylaws, this is what's the state law. You know, you can't be afraid to have those conversations and to be really direct. And, you know, you're an elected official, so it's different. you know, you would hope that you wouldn't have to go to like the state ethics board. But if it was bad enough, you know, that might be a tool in the toolkit. But I think for the most part, people don't want to do the wrong thing. They might think that they can do it for whatever reason, but policies are policies. And, you know, particularly in public government, everything should be above board. You don't want your townspeople to lose trust in you, because then they lose trust in the process, and that's not helpful for anyone. So I would bring it back to that, and I would kind of, you know, give them a little guilt trip.
Okay. So lastly, do you have any questions
Yes.
for us?
Uh-oh.
Oh,
Let's
oh,
get
boy.
the-
Bring it prepared. Grab my notes there. So now that I've talked about what I thought my priorities would be, what are your priorities in your town administrator?
Oh, boy. Well, I can speak from a little bit of things that I've been working with Gabe on, is bringing us a little bit into the technology world and updating some out-of-date infrastructure we have here in town hall. And, you know, I realize that's not something we can do all at once, although that would be my hope. But, you know, slow increments of that. One of them is the newsletter being a combination of in print and online. And other things, digital file management and things of that nature. So that's kind of what I have gravitated on as we've been working so closely in this transition. So it's kind of one of my goals, and I know we have to be fiscally responsible in that too.
I think my priorities, would be to, maybe up the level of professionalism. And to, you know, I think it goes hand in hand with what Melissa talked about of having good information. You know, finding better ways to communicate with the community. I mean, already, you know, I think all of us spend a lot of time, we've spent much more time in this transition time, but we have a lot going on in Shutesbury. And not just the regular, you know, kind of routine town business. So for a small community, there's, you know, we have litigation, we're building a library. And so there's a lot on us, and I think people don't always see that or understand that. I think the same goes for the town administrator, but yeah, I would like to see how we might improve communication, and obviously provide support to the new town administrator so that person can be successful and take some of the burden away from us.
I guess I'd say that, I'd like to figure out how to delegate responsibility better than we do, not just from us, I'm not talking just in general, in the town. And it's sort of a subset of that, and I'm not really sure there's an answer to it, but I'd like to try to figure out is. It seems to me, I mean, there's very little youth movement in this youth. In participation, what's it coming for, in government. And I understand all that, I mean, I have kids and I get the deal, you know, you get kids and all, but, you know, I don't know, it seems to me that people used to be more involved. So if that's true, or if it could be true, that's something I think we should work toward.
Yeah, no, I think that is true. At the MMA conference, you know, people were talking about there is less interest in government. And part of it is because discourse has kind of crumbled, particularly over the last several years. So it is a challenge to get people to come out. Another question.
Can I add one more thing, because just sitting in this room reminded me.
Yes.
You know,
the same thing.
we have issues with our physical assets. So, if you take a look around this room, you know, I come in here and cringe every time, and we haven't figured out a way. We haven't figured out a budget. We have a major paper problem in this community, as in way too much. You don't have, I know a lot of work has been done. There was a lot of research done around how to deal with, but there's no implementation. So, you know, I think if we could go back to sort of policies and plans and say, okay, you know, we had that group that looked at, at storage, information storage, and let's revisit, what were their recommendations,
you're right.
what haven't, you know, what haven't we done? We have policies that we've adopted, and, you know, we struggle to, like, have a comprehensive listing of what are all those policies, so sometimes I'm scratching my head and
Yeah.
saying, do we have a social media policy? I don't remember, but I have nowhere to look either, and, you know, we've had a web committee that's done a tremendous job in moving us forward and getting our website up and going. But they have to have the information from us too, and they have to, you know, have the, and we, you know, we have to follow through. So there's a lot of things we need to follow through on, and the physical plant is, you know, it's just one of them, along with a bunch of other stuff.
So the paper, is that just old files that haven't been digitized?
Gabe
Yeah,
will. Gabe
Just-
will
just
speak to
the-
that.
It's a little bit of that in in my answering your question is, I should be able to find it somewhere on a spot on the computer somewhere and just be able to look at it. And that's not what is it. The
File
village is-
organization
Yeah.
too.
Okay.
Yeah,
We are working on, disposing of all the miscellaneous stuff that's hanging around town hall. You can now walk into the storage closet. We started a records, retention issue where people are going through their stuff, they're going to the state for disposal of their records. We don't have places to store these things. We do need to explore how to store in the cloud so that our records can be done, that way and accessed that way. So it is just at the infancy of doing it.
But that's actually a good thing, especially for an incoming town manager.
It is.
And set the tone.
Yeah.
Now, do you have a personnel policy?
Melissa.
yes,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
do.
Okay.
We do have, we also are in the middle of revising the old one that is very out of date.
Okay.
And will be much larger when we're finished. There's a lot of things that we have to bring into it to update it. We do have something though.
And how many unions, like highway and police? Because you're volunteer fire, right?
Yeah, so it would be just teachers union and police union.
Yeah. teachers, too. Okay.
Not highway, not highway.
Yeah.
Not highway.
I'm just curious, do you know how many students in Shutesbury are enrolled in the regional school? I can't find the information anywhere online.
Sure,
Gonna
we've seen that figure.
We have, I'm gonna take a guess and say maybe. I'll say maybe 120 at the highest level, but I think it's less than that.
Okay. Okay, but you're not at the statutory method yet.
Yes, we are.
You are, okay.
We are with that 5-year rolling average. So
Yeah.
it's a
A modified.
Modified
statute, let's call it.
Okay. If you give me the job, I have a lot more questions about it. I won't get into
Welcome
that
to the
now,
club.
but,
Yeah, right.
yeah. Okay, no, I think that pretty well covers it. Is there anything else you need from me?
No, just, I think as I said at the outset, we're gonna go into executive session now. I hope to make a decision this evening, which we will announce then in, go back into public session. And, yeah, I guess my only other question is, if we were to select you, what's your availability? How much
I
notice do you
would
have to give?
look to start on April 7th. Give myself a couple weeks to wrap things up in Amherst and then take a break in between. I didn't do that last time and I
I
regretted
didn't
it.
either.
It's a good decision.
Okay, I think that's it. Well, thank you so
Yes.
much for coming.
Thank you for
in.
having me.
Really appreciate.
Likewise, I'm so happy for the opportunity.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well, all of you as well.
Executive session.
For the word.
Yes, because I didn't bring my little cheat sheet.
Oh, it's right here. It's right here.
Oh, you have it? Oh,
Well, it was
bad.
left in the room.
It was.
And we used it last
Oh,
time. It was
okay.
easy to stick it up on the door.
Go for it. That's very good. I ate way too much chocolate.
Is that a sit down or is that a sit down?
I don't know, for some reason, this chocolate was very popular. So waiting for, yeah, the committee members. Or we gonna include the committee members of justice? No. All right, so, yeah, yes, so we're gonna vote, but you can leave whatever. Thank you all for coming. You can come back.
I don't.
Is it gonna be quick?
So you can't stay
I
out.
don't.
How long
I
you gonna
don't.
take?
Well, here's what we can, here's what we can,
don't know.
here's a technology thing we can do. I'll put everyone a line in a waiting room, go home, log in, you'll be in the waiting room. And then when we are finished, we will pop you all back. How does that work?
That's good.
We'll use tech, no.
So we have time.
You've tried
Yes,
to get,
Right.
yes,
I
yes.
think-
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
yeah, okay. Good night. Okay, so,
Good luck and thank you for.
we're going to vote to go into executive session for reason number 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel or to conduct collective bargaining sessions and contract negotiations with non-union personnel. We will be going back into open session. And we need to take a roll call vote to initiate and make sure everybody who is up there.
Yeah, we do our we'll do the roll call vote.
Okay.
So,
All right,
Ms.
so,
Sonia,
do I hear a motion to
Yeah,
go into executive
sorry.
session?
I make a motion, we go into executive session
Okay,
for the
reason
reasons
number-
stated.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Make peace O'Neill, aye.
Start, right?
Carol, aye. Okay, thank you.
All right,
for
everybody, I'm gonna
everybody
put you,
who-
if you'd like to stay, I'm putting you all in a waiting room. So give me one moment. Hang on one second. Whiteboard. Okay. Give me with this, get that up and running. Okay,
There's people in the waiting. room.
there are, we told them to be.
Yeah, all right.
Here they come.
Good job.
And that worked great. And I figured out how to put them in the waiting room too. Now. And everybody seemingly got home safely, looks like. Good. Okay,
sorry, it took us a little bit longer. But the select board, Shutesbury Select Board is back in session, back in public session. It's now 7:08, approximately 7:09. And we wanted to announce that we have selected Haley Bolton as Shutesbury's.
they're all clapping.
Town administrator. And this is, of course, subject to reference checks and successful negotiation of a contract. We have notified Haley. That was part of the delay. We've also notified Adam. And she's very thrilled to, so I assume she will accept position and we will get the contract underway. And we have probably we have to deal with the start date.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure she gets
She's
some
not,
time,
she's a little flexible.
time off, but we're hoping we can push it up just a little bit. So stay tuned on that. And thank you all for coming this evening. It's nice to have a turnout. So and appreciate the work of the search committee.
Absolutely.
Who's happy, some of them are on
And
there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, they're all
Three of
set.
them.
Yeah,
Search
okay.
people.
Four.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So we are going to adjourn.
Yes, we
All right.
did our duty tonight.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn the select board
I will
meeting?
make a motion, we adjourn the select board meeting.
Second,
Second, okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Make peace, O'Neill, aye.
Stalker, I.
Carol, aye. Thanks again,
Thank you,
everybody. Good night.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.